Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I will be talking about the fifth film in the growing Monsterverse franchise, the 2024 release Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire. And we begin in Hollow Earth, the subterranean realm in which Kong now lives, 3 years after the events of 2021's Godzilla vs. Kong, a movie I thought squandered an excellent cast in tedium. Kong's primary activity in Hollow Earth is in searching for others of his kind, a quest that the watching humans of the Monarch organization believe to be futile. Kong, so far as they know, is the last of his kind. Meanwhile, on the Earth's surface, Godzilla continues to stand between humanity and the threat of giant monsters known as Titans, as demonstrated by him battling and slaying a giant spider-like monster named Titanocilla when it attacks Rome. Then an unidentified signal comes from deep inside Hollow Earth. The signal causes Gia, the last known survivor of the Iwi tribe from Skull Island, to experience hallucinations and visions, which understandably worries her adoptive mother, Kong expert Dr. Eileen Andrews. Adding to this worry is the fact that Godzilla clearly also senses the signal, and it provokes a sharp reaction. He attacks a nuclear plant in France, draining it of radiation, then heads to the lair of the Titan Tiamat in the Arctic. Monarch observers deduce that Godzilla is strengthening himself for an upcoming threat. As all this is happening, a sinkhole opens in Hollow Earth near Kong's home, allowing the mighty ape to descend into an uncharted part of the realm. There, he finally finds what he has been looking for, others of his kind. But they are ruled by a vicious and despotic leader known as the Scar King, who, thanks to his command over an ice-breathing titan named Shimo, is able to defeat Kong and drive him away. What this is all leading up to, of course, is some tag team kaiju action as Big G and King Kong buddy up, with a little help from their human friends, to face off against the Scar King and his forces. Now, I personally didn't care much for Godzilla vs. Kong, but it was one of the few commercial successes during the COVID-19 pandemic, so it was little surprise that Legendary Pictures moved promptly to begin production of this follow-up film. The New Empire was announced in March 2022 and began filming later that year, about 50 or 60 miles down the road from me, in fact, which in Australian terms is practically next door. When the movie hit cinemas 2 years later, it received a mixed critical reception, with many reviews comparing it unfavourably to Toho's 2023 offering, Godzilla Minus One. I'm not sure the comparison is particularly apt, really. Yes, both monsters have a giant reptilian creature called Godzilla in them, but in the Japanese movie, he's an implacable, uncaring engine of destruction in what is essentially a disaster film, while in this, Godzilla is largely a good guy, even if his drives are instinctive rather than altruistic, and the genre is very clearly thrill-ride action flick. Now, don't get me wrong, Minus One is a better film, but there will be plenty of people who enjoy this one more. Certainly it was successful with audiences, bringing in nearly $600 million at the box office, and ensuring that the Twin Titans were back in 27 for yet another punch-up-the-bad-guy monster adventure. But that movie is still over a year away. In the meantime, let's talk about this one, and let's start with something I think the movie gets right. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a kaiju film man in need of some cost-effective filming content must be in want of a human-scale storyline. The New Empire is no exception, but it handles this need in smart fashion by exploring similar themes in the human-scale story and the kaiju-scale one. Kong is driven throughout this film by his need to find others like him. He spends the first act of the film prowling the Hollow Earth for any sign of other giant apes, and the rest of it fighting to save his people from the menace of the Scar King. Running in parallel to this is Gia's existence as the last of the Iwi tribe. She understandably feels lost and alone in the world despite the best efforts of her adoptive mother, Dr. Eileen Andrews. Like Kong, Gia will discover her family/home through the course of this movie's events. The answers they come to aren't necessarily the same. That would probably be a bit too on the nose if they were. But the use of similar themes and journeys makes the human and Titan level stories feel more integrated and cohesive, which is, I think, a smart bit of work. So thumbs up for that. I don't think the next factor I'm going to talk about is intrinsically good or bad, though some people might feel differently, but it is certainly a thing that's worth mentioning because despite Godzilla getting first billing in the title, this is very much a Kong film, not a Godzilla film. Big G is basically only here to be in fight scenes. He fights Scylla, he fights Tiamat, he fights Kong because of course come on, the two of them have to throw down at least a little, and then he fights the real bad guy. You could eliminate all of Godzilla's appearance without actually touching the narrative themes and arcs in any way. The movie would be shorter, of course, and the humans would have to contribute a lot more to the final battle, rather than mostly sitting by and letting Kong and Big G do all the heavy lifting. But the shape of the overall story would be pretty much exactly the same, because the narrative here is entirely driven by Kong and Gia's parallel quest, first to find others of their kind, and then to protect/rescue them from the menace of the Scar King. And like I said, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if you're a huge Godzilla fan and you don't care about Kong, it probably is. But similarly, if you're a big Kong fan and you don't really care about Godzilla, then it'll be great for you. I'm in the middle. But it's probably easier to make these movies if only one of Kong or Godzilla is the main narrative focus while the other plays useful sidekick. But if you're much more of a Big G stan than a Kong fan, you should probably be aware your guy is playing second fiddle here. One aspect of the film that I do think is definitely a flaw is that it tries to wedge a bit too much in. Godzilla has nothing to really do in this story except punch bad guys. The movie's answer is to throw in a couple extra monsters for him to fight and kill. The appearances of these titans are brief and, to my mind, unsatisfying, which is a shame because I found them much more visually interesting than the real antagonists of the film. And as I said, I did find those antagonists a bit underwhelming in general, especially the Scar King himself. The movie gives a lot of talking about how dangerous the Scar King is, but I didn't really see real evidence for it on screen. Getting back to my original point, though, the rather anemic appearances granted to Scylla and Tiamat, they really missed a trick not calling the second Titan Charybdis, in my mind, is a symptom of a wider flaw in the movie, which is that there are simply more characters and stuff than we need. On the too many characters front, the movie has little need either for Bernie Hayes, who is at least a returning face, or for new character Trapper, who seems to be in the movie purely because the filmmakers couldn't conceive of not having a handsome white guy at the centre of things. There. Your human story is about Gia and Dr. Andrews' movie. You don't need this guy. The use of rock songs in the movie's soundtrack is also a little bit too cutesy for my taste. Done selectively, this can be great. I'll sometimes watch the Thunderstruck Battleship montage just by itself, but the bit is done too many times here for my taste, and I found it a bit on the nose. Overall, though, this was a fun bit of action spectacle. My favourite MonsterVerse movie since Kong Skull Island. I enjoyed it enough that I'll probably watch the next one, even though it will reportedly centre on the human element on the new handsome white guy, which... Of course it will. Next time, low-budget cinematic cash-ins of hit movies are a tale as old as cinema, frankly. 1933's The Vampire Bat is a novel example of the form. That is next time. Until then, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you've seen Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire, let me know what you thought of it.